The afraid side is the losing side. This is the story of the hottest man of the Bible and how fear caused him to lose the entire kingdom. Absalom was a dreamboat. He was really, really, really good looking. This is how the Bible puts it. In all Israel, there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. Whenever he cut the hair of his head, and he used to cut his hair once a year because it was too heavy for him, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. Absalom was a prince, which means he represented the future. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of Ahithophel of Jezreel. Pay attention to this name. This is important in Absalom's story. His second son, Joab, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Absalom was fabulous. I mean, he had that, what did the kids call it this day? The riz? I mean, he looked the part. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses with 50 men to run ahead of him. Let's go. You know, I can just imagine it with the hair blowing in the wind and the horses and chariots running, the man going ahead of him because, you know, he was just that fly. Absalom was charismatic and popular. He had the love of the people. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" And the person would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or a case could come to me, and I will see that they receive justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach his hand, "Oh, no, take hold of him and kiss him." Absalom behaved in this way towards all of the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. I mean, how could you resist? You have a handsome prince who comes to you and says, "I will advocate for you. I will give you the justice you need." I mean, he was approachable. The prince. And then you go to bow before him and he picks you up and kisses you. That is the most seductive thing ever. No one, I mean, absolutely no one could resist. Ugh, what a dreamboat. I just keep trying to imagine what it would be like being Absalom. You know, perfect in every way humanly possible. What would I do with myself? I'd probably just lay around and use my hair to wrap around my body and just all day long, because I am, you know, fabulous, and what else is there to do? And so not only was he handsome and the prince, the future, fabulous and loved by the people, just popular, he was also strategic. He planned the long game. This guy got brains too. So for this one, I need to give you a bit of context. And here's kind of where the story gets dark. Remember Amnon, the first son of David? So Amnon was obsessed with Absalom's sister, Tamar. Now Tamar was just like her brother. She's like the female version of her brother. She is gorgeous, absolutely stunning. And Amnon, her stepbrother, was obsessed with her. So obsessed that, he just felt like he had to have her. And so what Amnon did was Amnon pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, he pretty much said, oh, please ask my sister to come and make bread before me, like make me some food. And David wanted to honor his heir apparent and said, hey, Tamar, please go make some food for your brother. And so Tamar goes to make food for Amnon. And while she's making it, Amnon essentially says, come bring this bread into my bedroom. And then he sends everyone out. And when everyone was gone, he makes a pass at Tamar. And Tamar goes, oh no, because Tamar is a virgin at this point. So she's a princess, she's a virgin. And she said, look, Amnon, we can't do this because this is going to be a stain. Why don't you go ask the king for my hand and make this thing official? But Amnon will just refuse to control himself and is Tamar. So Tamar is bawling, and I guess Amnon was just furious about how she rejected him. So at this point, he just goes from obsessed with her to just disgusted and kicks her out. So Tamar goes to Absalom. Her brother Absalom said to her, has that Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He's your brother. Don't take this thing to heart. And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. When King David heard all this, he was furious. And Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. So check this out. Absalom hated Amnon, but he just kept that to himself. Pay attention. And also notice that even though King David was furious about the incident, he didn't really do anything because Amnon was his heir apparent. He was the firstborn. So here's why I want you to pay attention to the timeline. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Baal-Hazor near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. And in verse 28, Absalom ordered his men, listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Amnon down, then don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and brave. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. But Jonadab, son of Shimeah, David's brother, said, my lord should not think that they killed all the princes. Only Amnon is dead. This has been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon married his sister Tamar. 2 years. 2 years. So right after that, what does Absalom do? Absalom flees. He goes into exile. He runs to his maternal grandfather's kingdom. Remember, his maternal grandfather was a king of Geshur. Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. But King David mourned many days for his son. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years. So keep paying attention to the timeline because this is going to be important. So some after 3 years, Joab, which is the captain of the army under King David, goes and indirectly pleads the case for Absalom. What the Bible is silent about is whether Absalom puts Joab to it, but we know that Joab goes and does this indirectly. So essentially, Joab has some woman go up to the king and say, hey, I had my 2 sons, and by accident, one of my sons killed the other son. And all these people want to get rid of the son that murked his brother. And if they do this, I'm going to be left with no sons. And please, please, please bring justice to me. And King David essentially says, oh, no. I'm going to essentially make sure they don't murk your other son. After pleading this case multiple times, and David really assures her, and she says, well, King David, why are you trying to do the same thing? Your son Absalom is in exile because he murked his brother. Like, how far? What's up with that? You got to bring him back. And then David realized that this was the work of Joab, his captain, but he agrees to bring Absalom back. So Absalom returns to the kingdom, but after he returns, the king still refuses to grant Absalom audience with him. And so Absalom reaches out to Joab because he wants him to plead his case, like, hey, get me an audience with the king. And Joab ignores Absalom. Oh, by the way, I don't even know if it's Joab or Job, but I'm just gonna say Joab to differentiate him from the guy who had everything taken from him because the devil and God decided to essentially have a bet on whether Job would turn against God. But you know, that's another story. So Joab is what we're going with. So Joab refuses to go to Absalom, and so you know what Absalom does? Absalom has his men burn up his field, his barley field. And then Joab shows up, is like, hey man, what's up? Why are you burning my field? It's like, look, I sent for you, you didn't come. So here's the deal. I want to see the king. I want an audience with the king.
I'm not so worried.
Huh?
I'm not worried.
It'll work.
One thing that devil and that mess.
Well, I mean, it's gonna have to work.
It works.
It kind of was a bet.
No.
Well, you could disagree with me later, but it kind of was.
It's logically accurate.
Well, get in my comments and let me know. But that's my story. I'm sticking with it.
The devil or sought permission.
Dude, leave me alone. This is my story. I'm sticking to it. If you can go in my comments and disagree, okay? Leave me alone. So, Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. Absalom said to Joab, look, I sent word to you and said, come here so I can send you to the king to ask. Why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I was still there. Now then, I want to see the king's face. And if I'm guilty of anything, let him put me to death. So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king. And the king kissed Absalom. Of course he did. Absalom is irresistible. I mean, once he's in front of you, you can't resist. Who's gonna blame King David? Of course he kissed him. So that's how Absalom was finally able to get audience with his father. So at the end of 4 years, so this is 2 years after gaining that audience, Absalom decided, you know what? I'm ready to take over the kingdom. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron. The king said to him, go in peace. So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. All right, so let's look at this timeline, guys. Incident, and then 2 years later, he takes revenge. And then plus 3 years in exile. So now we're 5 years in. Then 2 years after exile without seeing the king's face, and then 2 years later he's ready to take over the kingdom. So we're talking about a total of 9 years from the incident. And he's like, you know, I don't know whether it's because his father didn't enact the proper justice that he felt his sister Tamar required and he would do a better job, but from the incident to when he decided that I'm ready to run this place, 9 years. Okay, so this is what I'm calling strategic, the long game. He never forgot. He never forgot what happened to his sister. He never forgot what the heir apparent did. He never forgot what his father did. He was ready to run this place, okay? 9 years, but he played the long game and he made it work. So now let's count out all the things that just make Absalom. So far we have handsome, the prince, the future, fabulous, charismatic and popular, loved by all the people. And now he's also strategic, plays a long game, and got the brain just braining, just beautiful. And if that wasn't enough, oh, we're gonna add one more. I'm gonna read it and you're gonna see. Absalom, despite being intelligent, knew that that wasn't enough. And so he went and hired the wisest man in the entire kingdom. Check this out. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept increasing. Now, in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. I mean, this guy was a counselor to King David himself, and Absalom was able to convince him to jump ship to come advise him. Dude, I mean, look at this guy. Oh, I gotta run through this again. Handsome, the prince, the future, fabulous, charismatic, popular, loved by the people, strategic and plays a long game, and now has the wisdom of the wisest man in the kingdom, almost like hearing the voice of God. I mean, what else could Absalom need? This is the perfect human being. Could anybody be flyer than this guy? No. At this point, my bet is in. Like, I am Team Absalom, okay? David, and we're gonna talk about David in a minute, but you know, please make way for my man. Make way for my man. Make way. So let's talk about David. What exactly does David have on his side? Well, David is a king, the current king, so he represents the status quo, the present. David also represents former glory. A lot of the book of Samuel talks about David's exploits. David was a great man of battle. I mean, he conquered many kingdoms, he won many wars, he was just a really great fighter. So there was a lot of glory and battle lore around David. So when David heard about all of Israel declaring that Absalom was king in Hebron, David essentially told his people, look, we are going to lose. We are going to lose to Absalom. I mean, even King David knew how seductive his son was. He knew that him going against Absalom, there was no way. Like, it wasn't even a match. Absalom was definitely going to win. Like, he had all the traits. I mean, that's my guy, yo. So David told his people, we got to get out of Dodge. We got to go now. And so David and some of his loyalists hit the road. They decided to leave the palace and run. He left 10 concubines to take care of the palace while everybody else left. But check this out. The priests wanted to run with him. But the king also said to Zadok, the priest. Oh, by the way, this is the same Zadok in, I don't know if you know this British crowning song, you know, when they're doing the coronation. And they go, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet. Yeah, that one. The king also said to Zadok the priest, do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Ahimaaz with you, and also Abiathar's son Jonathan. You and Abiathar return with your 2 sons. I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. Ooh. You see what's happening there? David is amassing for himself spies. People on his side, loyalists, who are going to stay back in Jerusalem and report back to him. So now we got 4 spies. Zadok, Abiathar, and their 2 sons. And then let's continue on this web of spies. Now David had been told Ahithophel, the wise man, is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai, the Archite, was there to meet him. His robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests, Zadok and Abiathar, be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Your two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear. So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. Web of spies and subverters. See, David's got nothing, really, except that. I mean, at this point, he even had fear. He's running. They're running. The fear is on their side. Absalom has everything. Absalom is fabulous, has everything. But David put his spies there, 4 spies, and now Hushai, who's a spy and a subverter. So based on this, if we're placing bets, Absalom has the upper hand. Fear goes from David's camp into Absalom's camp. So Absalom asks Ahithophel for advice on what to do next with David. Check this out. Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he's weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people with him flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and to the elders of Israel. So let me summarize this plan for you. Essentially, Ahithophel is telling Absalom, you are strong. David is weak. Pursue him and destroy him only. The rest of the people will join you. Great advice. They like it, right? But Absalom, I guess he listened too closely to, the saying that in the multitude of advisors, wisdom, or whatever. And he decides that he wanted a second opinion. So Absalom decided to hear from Hushai as well. But Absalom said, summon also Hushai the Archites, so we can hear what he has to say as well. When Hushai came to him, Absalom said, Ahithophel has given this advice. Should we do what he says? If not, give us your opinion. Hushai replied to Absalom, the advice Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They are fighters and as fierce as a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Besides, your father is an experienced fighter. He will not spend the night with the troops. Even now, he is hidden in a cave or some other place. If he should attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, there has been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldier, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt with fear. For all Israel knows that your father is a fighter and that those with him are brave. So I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, be gathered to you, with you leading them into battle. Then we will attack him wherever he may be found, and we will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. And if he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it down to the valley until not so much as a pebble is left. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. For the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. Why is God against Absalom now? What did he do? He was perfect. Why did God decide to be against Absalom? It's not fair. So let me summarize the advice of Hushai. Hushai says, David is strong and he will defeat you. You are weak and you need more people. Guess what Hushai did after giving that advice? Yes, you guessed it. Hushai told the spies so that they could go tell David to act accordingly. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I have advised them to do so and so. Now send a message at once and tell David, do not spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. And just like that, Absalom, the handsome young prince that represents the future, fabulous, charismatic, popular, loved by the people, followed by the people, the strategic intelligence, plays a long game, that has the wisest man in the kingdom on his side. What is the one thing he did wrong? He allowed the voice of fear. He allowed the voice that said, you are not enough. You're weak. Your enemy is strong. Your opponent is strong. He allowed that voice into his head. And there is the beginning of the downfall. First thing, wisdom leaves the camp. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order and then himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. See, Ahithophel's job was to be the voice of wisdom. That was his identity. And so, at the point in which he was of no use anymore, he decided to end it. And so one of the valuable characters on Absalom's side is gone. When fear enters the camp, wisdom goes. David's army marched out of the city to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There, Israel's troops were routed by David's men, and the casualties that day were great. 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest swallowed up more men that day than the sword. Now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and as the mule went under the thick branches of a large oak, Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. He was left hanging in mid-air while the mule he was riding kept on going. When one of the men saw what had happened, he told Joab, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. And Joab said, I'm not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hand and plunged them into Absalom's heart while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him and him. The moral of the story, be careful who you have in your ear. The voice that instills fear is the voice of the enemy. No, Hushai! I know you may not feel fearless now, but hang with me and we'll get there together. I'm going to be my Absalom energy all week. If you see me, better cross over to the other side of the road.